At the beginning of this course, we were asked to do an assignment of our aha moment. I chose to do my aha moment on an experience I had in the classroom with my third graders, and it revolved around the third graders finally understanding their math problems on multiplication. The aha moment to me was my perception of how they were able to understand the math after I worked hard, they worked hard, and there was some understanding of the multiplication problems. Throughout this course, I was able to learn what reality, perception, mythology, and interpretation meant. I have changed completely what my views were on this aha moment that we were asked to do in the beginning of the course. Therefore, now I think that my aha moment could have been different. I understand perceptions different, realities different, illusions come into play. We create the story. Thereas an author might be writing the story, but we, as the reader, create in our imagination what is being understood. That is when I think throughout this course, when I read every story, I tried to depict and understand it in a different language, in a different way, seeing it in a different light rather than I normally would. For my thesis, I think that every story, novel, life experience is based off of perception, reality, and understanding of the interpretation. Through this video, I will go over what I've learned, what has changed, what helped me change my views on perception, how I evolved through these past 3 weeks concerning perception is a term that I used quite often in this course. I used it over and I referred to it quite often. When I did my aha moment assignment in the beginning of the course, I was very vague. I chose a topic that I thought relate to an aha moment. I thought aha moment is when bang, a light bulb comes on and you understand and you get what happened and what you did and the changes that were made. I felt that that was my aha moment. But throughout the course, I learned that there's so much more to it, that it's not just so black and white, that it's different. So I decided to look up what perception actually meant. I looked up the term and it stated that it means something that can be seen, heard, or felt. I understand perception is an understanding. Throughout the course, I stopped looking at things in one way and trying to see things in a bigger picture. That is when I understood perception means when you interpret something. For example, in the short story, Truffles, Miss Wright was looked at differently because she decided to murder her husband. When I was reading this story, I thought of when there had to have been a reason why she decided to kill her husband. There had to have been a reason what led to this. Did he do something to her? Was something going on? All these thoughts were my interpretation of the text. And I was given very little facts, very little understanding, and I couldn't understand why that happened. But even though I couldn't understand, my interpretation of it was something happened. The reality of that situation is one that only she understood. Reality is very important. Reality is a version of understanding of only what we want to see. Early in the course, I used an example of relationships, good relationships, bad relationships, friendships, coworkers, bosses, any relationships that show reality. I think that's a great example because we are blinded by our friendships, relationships, period. We only see the portion we put in, and when they don't put in their part, we are quick to judge, quick to interpret something completely different. And I think that in the course, my beliefs were shown to me in text by the short story with Gully Martin's Song. Gully Mard was in love with Song, and he found out that she was a man. So he was disgusted, upset, hurt that how can she be a man? And I think that this is where his reality was that it wasn't what he thought it was going to be. He wasn't as in love because of the fact she was a man. And being in a relationship is difficult because the reality is not always what it is to be. Reality in that short story also had illusion and fantasy. He was fantasizing about being with Song. He was so in love. He had so many affairs, and this is the one he wanted to be with. But illusions tend to be something you wish for, and fantasies are something that you hope. And reality is the reality of the situation, what's really going on. And this tends to happen all the time. The reasoning behind I felt illusion and fantasy intertwine is because everyone brings it along with reality. Like for me, for example, I don't feel like I have anything that I want or wish or need for, but I always catch myself fantasizing the what ifs, or can things be different, or what if I didn't do that, or I too don't see things the way that they need to be seen, or I underestimate or overestimate my friendships and relationships. And I learned in this course that characters bring a sense of reality to the text. You relate situations that character has with your own self to have a better understanding of what the author is telling a story. But the reader is the one that is going to share and understand what's going on. We tend to take in two types of information: facts and what we want to believe. We tend to look on our personal beliefs. For example, if you were one belief and something that isn't part of your beliefs occurred, you wouldn't change your mind. You have this perception already embedded in you. As for myself, I'm a person of a glass half empty, and it would always be hard for me to change that. But I think through this course, I was able to learn things regarding reading and understanding text, which I absolutely love that I got to understand that. When we were learning about poetry, there was an example of reality. The poem was named Facing It. It was of a man that was at the Vietnam War, and he comes back and he's standing in front of a memorial of all his army brothers that passed away. And I envisioned, I interpreted, I understood his sorrow, his pain. I can sense it through the words I was reading. And it's because his reality was that they died and he didn't. And to live with that, to have the sense of that feeling, the gut feeling that why him and not them. And I think that's where reality hit me, was this happens to us all the time. It's not just in text, it's experiences, life experience. This happens to people. I thought also how he fantasized about his army brothers, that he wishes that they would still be with him. Another form of reality to me is where you judge a book by its cover, where you see someone on the street and automatically think that they're in poverty when you have no idea where they got there, how they got there, what they're doing, how successful they were. You judge, you assume, you don't understand their reality, you have no understanding of what's going on. And when I did my novel assignments, I was reading about Luis Rodriguez in the novel Always Running, and he was a young gangster in Los Angeles, Mexican, and I understood him as being this gangster, but the words in the book wrote how he wanted to be something else. He wanted to be different. So I can relate that people look at you and they think one thing of you, and that has nothing to do with who you are. The reality of the situation is that you are not just a gangster in Los Angeles. You are a young child struggling with who you want to become. So it was tough. I think interpretation is very important when you are reading text. I learned that when you're reading something, you are the person that are interpreting something that's making it different, that you are sharing these words. You are the ones that are making the text come alive. The words are written there for you, but you make everything come together. Throughout this course, I've learned very many different things. That the words that are written, that there are many other words written behind them. And you are the sole person to determine what it means. Again, I believe interpretation, reality, and perception is what makes literature so important. And not only literature, I think it's something that we live with daily, is by living by reality, interpretation, and perception. So in conclusion, throughout this course, I've learned lots of different ways to see everything. I've learned how interpretation is how we take it. The author is relating how they felt, heartfelt experiences, things that they've gone through. But as the reader, we take in our interpretation. We use our own emotions, our own perspective, our own beliefs, thoughts, different things that will change the text that the author is writing, that the poet has wrote. We change that text, our perspective, our thoughts do this. And as the reader, also, I have learned that we, the reader, are the main reason the story evolves. The author writes out a interpretation that they want the reader to take in, but once those words are read and understood, we change it. I felt this way throughout the whole course. It was tough. I had a hard time. I reread and I tried my hardest to understand what the author was meaning, but ultimately it's what I took in. For example, I know that reality is different from an illusion. I've learned that. Some illusions are made into realities, as well as some realities are illusions. Also, I've learned that it changes when we are looking at something that might not be there, like Gallimard, when he was in love with Song. I learned that was the biggest turning point for me throughout this course, was reading that story. I could relate. Relating is something that is so huge throughout this course that helps us understand the text. I will be using the terminology and the way I see things differently now. there as in the beginning of the course during my aha moment, how I just felt it was a light bulb that would just switch on when something changes and you feel it and see it, and it's much more bigger. It's reality, it's illusion, it's taking a different concept in, it's understanding. I have a different view of how an aha moment is meant. So if I could go back and redo that assignment, it would be done very differently.